Chapter 10. Mighty Current. Despite Jim Crow's long reign, against daunting, mountainous odds, African Americans persevered. They pressed on with their ambitions to attend college, get an education, own a home, or start a business. A multitude of proud, determined men and women also gave of their time and of their treasure to groups devoted to racial uplift and to pushing back against the negative stereotypes of black people so pervasive during the Jim Crow era. So many refused to be defeated. So many refused to give up on the hope that their country one day would live up to the glorious idea that all people are created equal, that all people deserve to live unfettered and free. So many essentially had as their motto that of a school Nannie Burroughs would open in Washington, D.C. in 1909. We specialize in the wholly impossible. It was in Washington, D.C., in July 1896, 2 months after the Plessy decision, that black women formed the National Association of Colored Women, NACW. NACW was a merger of the National Federation of Afro-American Women, founded in Boston, and the National League of Colored Women, headquartered in D.C. Josephine St. Pierre Ruffin spearheaded the conference, founding the Woman's Era Club and the Woman's Era, the nation's first newspaper aimed at black women, are just two of her achievements. Joining Ruffin in the formation of the NACW were Ida B. Wells, writer Frances E.W. Harper, Harriet Tubman, then in her 70s, and Victoria Earle Matthews, soon to found the White Rose Mission, a settlement house in New York City. NACW's first president was Mary Church Terrell, daughter of the prominent Memphis businessman Robert Church. Terrell, fluent in French, German, and Italian, had earned her bachelor's and master's degrees from Oberlin College, then lived in Europe for 2 years. She had recently been appointed to the Washington, D.C. Board of Education when elected the NACW's first president. As an umbrella organization for black women's clubs around the nation, NACW raised money for schools, libraries, and charities, as well as for concerts and other cultural events. NACW raised awareness of racial wrongs, from lynchings to black voter suppression in the South. It also campaigned for women to have the national vote, not achieved until 1920. The organization, still a powerhouse today as the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs, NACWC, took as its motto, "Lifting as we climb." Black men were hardly idle. In March 1897, a small group of intellectuals established the American Negro Academy, ANA, a literary society and think tank. Founding members included the northern-born debonair W.E.B. Du Bois, a graduate of Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee, and the first black person to earn a Ph.D. from Harvard University, 1895. At the time of the ANA's founding, Du Bois was a professor at Atlanta University, now Clark Atlanta. Like Fisk, another historically black school created during Reconstruction. The publication of Du Bois's seminal collection of essays, The Souls of Black Folk, was 6 years away. The princely Episcopal priest, Alexander Crummell, was the ANA's president. Born free in New York City in 1819, Crummell earned his bachelor's degree in England at the University of Cambridge in 1853. He went on to teach at Liberia College in Liberia, West Africa, where he lived for 20 years. The papers that the ANA produced include The Status of the Free Negro Prior to 1860 by Lafayette M. Hershaw, a Washington, D.C. civil servant and journalist. Another is The Economic Contribution by the Negro in America by New York bibliophile Arthur Schomburg. This Afro-Puerto Rican man's collection of black history-related books, pamphlets, and ephemera became the foundation for today's Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, a branch of the New York Public Library located in Harlem, New York. ANA members, like other black strivers, did not merely want their nation to recognize what their people were capable of. They wanted the whole world to know. For this cause, in the spring of 1900, Du Bois headed to the World's Fair in Paris, France. When Congress funded the exposition's American Pavilion, there was no thought of including anything about black contributions and achievements. Du Bois's fellow Fisk alum, Thomas Calloway, an attorney working at the War Department, raised a ruckus. He received tremendous support from U.S. Representative George Henry White of North Carolina, the last black member of Congress to serve at the dawn of the new century, and a man on fire for anti-lynching legislation and an end to the disenfranchisement of black men. White fought hard for black America to be represented at that World's Fair in Paris. Owing to his efforts, Congress allocated $15,000 for an exhibit on African Americans. Calloway turned to Du Bois for a display on the achievements of black people in Georgia. Calloway chose the Peach State because it had the largest Negro population and because it is a leader in Southern sentiment. To the Paris Exposition. Thousands upon thousands will go, and a well-selected and prepared exhibit representing the Negro's development in his churches, his schools, his homes, his farms, his stores, his professions, and pursuits in general will attract attention and do a great and lasting good in convincing thinking people of the possibilities of the Negro. Thomas Calloway, in an October 1899 letter to more than 100 prominent black citizens. Du Bois won a gold medal for his exhibit, pulled together in a matter of a few months, a display he called an honest, straightforward exhibit of a small nation of people, picturing their life and development without apology or gloss, and above all, made by themselves. His wondrous work included hundreds of photographs bearing witness to black successes against the odds, not all of them taken in Georgia. There was, for example, a photograph of the board of directors of a manufacturing company in Concord, North Carolina, and of S.J. Gilpin's shoe store in Richmond, Virginia. Images of proud, resourceful, accomplished, and dignified black people, nicely dressed and well-groomed, were a powerful counter to the proliferating Sambo art. Images on ads, books, postcards, and knickknacks depicting black people with exaggerated features, often up to no good. Men stealing chickens, for example, or lustily devouring watermelons. Some items bore images of grinning black children about to be devoured by alligators and of black women looking rather daft and pleased as punch to serve white people. The photographs Du Bois displayed in Paris said, "No, that is not who we are. Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise, high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won." The first stanza of Lift Every Voice and Sing, the national black anthem, written by James Weldon Johnson and set to music by his brother, J. Rosamond Johnson. This song was first performed by 500 children in Jacksonville, Florida, on February 12, 1900, as part of a celebration of Abraham Lincoln's birthday. By the time Du Bois returned from the Paris Exposition Universelle, that lone black U.S. Congressman, George Henry White, first elected to Congress in 1897, had decided not to seek another term. The onslaught of white supremacy in his home state assured White that to campaign for a third term would be fruitless, explains a brief biography of the man on a U.S. House of Representatives website. On January 29, 1901, White bid his colleagues in the Capitol adieu, and not with a whimper, but with sound and fury. "This, Mr. Chairman, is perhaps the Negro's temporary farewell to the American Congress," said White. "But let me say, phoenix-like, he will rise up some day and come again. These parting words are in behalf of an outraged, heartbroken, bruised, and bleeding, but God-fearing people, faithful, industrious, loyal people, rising people full of potential force." In leaving Congress, White did not leave the field in terms of helping them rise. He served his people as a lawyer in Washington, D.C., and later in Philadelphia. White also helped establish a black town in New Jersey, Whitesboro, to prove that self-sufficient blacks could not only survive, but flourish if left alone in a neutral, healthy environment. W.E.B. Du Bois became even more engaged in the campaign for racial justice for that small nation of people. In February 1905, Du Bois and William Monroe Trotter invited about 60 black men to a conference. It was held July 11th through 13th at the Erie Beach Hotel on the Canadian side of Niagara Falls. The 29 men who answered the call hailed from 14 states. They included Alonzo F. Herndon, who had been born into slavery. This man, who began life with nothing, owned several barbershops in Atlanta, one of which featured chandeliers and gold fixtures. Herndon had recently launched what became the Atlanta Life Insurance Company and was on his way to becoming the city's wealthiest black resident. His son, Norris B. Herndon, would become one of Harvard Business School's first black graduates. Also, there was the conference co-organizer, the hot-tempered William Monroe Trotter of Boston, the son of James Monroe Trotter, a Union Army veteran and a man of means. He was the first black Harvard man elected to Phi Beta Kappa, graduating magna cum laude in 1895. In 1901, Trotter had founded a newspaper he named The Guardian. Its motto, "For every right, with all thy might." Du Bois, Herndon, Trotter, and the other men of mark who met at the Falls formed the Niagara Movement, so named for the place of its founding and for the mighty current of change they endeavored to bring about in their protest of Jim Crow and other injustices. The Niagara Movement was also pledged to unleash a mighty current of protest against the Wizard of Tuskegee's philosophy. By then, Booker T. Washington had a vast network of operatives promoting his philosophy, known as the Tuskegee Machine. With the ear of white philanthropists and politicians, Washington could secure jobs for loyalists and steer funds to schools and other organizations in step with his thinking. He could also hurt the prospects of people and organizations not in line with him. That said, in reality, a host of black men and women were very much in line with Washington, genuinely believing that economic development ought to be their people's primary focus. Surprisingly, Washington also secretly supported some progressive political causes. By 1907, the Niagara Movement had 30 branches with 300 members. There was also a junior Niagara Movement for college men and recent college graduates. Resolved that the Negro race in America now needs fearless, upright, uncompromising leaders. Resolved that it is detrimental to the interest of any race to give up on political rights for the sake of immediate pecuniary gain. Two suggested topics of discussion in a junior Niagara Movement recruiting pamphlet. By 1910, the Niagara Movement splintered when several of its members joined a new group, the Interracial National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, which would become the nation's largest civil rights organization. The NAACP was born of yet another white-on-black rampage, this one in the North, in Springfield, Illinois, Abraham Lincoln's adopted hometown. There, on the steamy early evening of August 14, 1908, white men gathered at the county jail intent on lynching George Richardson, a black construction worker locked up that day after a white woman falsely accused him of sexual assault. There was another black man in that jail, Joe James, arrested in July for the murder of a white man. With trouble brewing, Sheriff Charles Werner had both black men transferred to a jail some 60 miles away from Springfield. When angry white men learned of this, they went wild. The eastern sky is lurid with the reflection of raging fires, reported the Illinois State Journal on August 15th of the destruction of a mostly black neighborhood. "Lincoln freed you. We'll show you where you belong," was one of the cries with which the Springfield mob set about to drive the Negroes from town. So began the article, "The Race War in the North," by white journalist and reformer William English Walling. With his wife, Anna Strunsky, Walling had rushed to Springfield as soon as news of the violence reached them in Chicago. The mob was composed of several thousand of Springfield's white citizens, wrote Walling, while other thousands, including many women and children, and even prosperous businessmen in automobiles, calmly looked on, and the rioters proceeded hour after hour and on 2 days in succession to make deadly assaults on every Negro they could lay their hands on, to sack and plunder their houses and stores, and to burn and murder. By the night of August 16th, Illinois National Guardsmen had Springfield under control. When the smoke cleared, 4 white men were dead, and 2 black men had been lynched. Scores of people were injured. Yet who realizes the seriousness of the situation and what large and powerful body of citizens is ready to come to black people's aid? Walling agonized at the end of The Race War in the North, which ran in a New York City newspaper, The Independent, on September 3, 1908. 5 months later, on February 12, 1909, the centennial of Lincoln's birth, 60 extremely concerned citizens released a call for a conference on the fight for racial justice that spring in New York City. Thus, the origins of the NAACP. The majority of the men and women who signed that call were white. Along with William English Walling, they included millionaire John E. Milholland, Mary White Ovington, co-founder of the Greenpoint Settlement in Brooklyn, New York, and Lillian Wald, founder of the Henry Street Settlement House in Lower Manhattan. There was also a grandson of the fiery abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison, Oswald Garrison Villard, editor of the New York Evening Post. Ida B. Wells was one of the 7 black people who signed. W.E.B. Du Bois was another. In 1910, Du Bois launched the NAACP's monthly magazine, The Crisis. Its mission was to set forth those facts and arguments which show the danger of race prejudice, particularly as manifested today toward colored people. In fulfilling its mission, The Crisis offered readers national and international news. It alerted them to must-read books. It shone the spotlight on black achievements and possibilities. The Chicago Defender was another organ of pride and protest. Attorney Robert Sengstack Abbott, a native of St. Simon's Island, Georgia, whose parents had been enslaved, launched this weekly newspaper in 1905. Other leading black newspapers of the day included the Harlem-based Amsterdam News and the Pittsburgh Courier. The black press was a lifeline, a rescue for a despised people in a nation still flooded with items bearing insulting images of black men and women, girls and boys, dolls, fans, postcards, figurines, advertisements, utensils, coin banks, sheet music, planters, toys. All were used to promote stereotypes of black people, propagating the lie that black people were not beautiful or intelligent. D.W. Griffith's blockbuster, The Birth of a Nation, was a monumental outrage. Originally released in early February 1915 under the title The Klansman, the title of Thomas Dixon's novel on which the film was based, The Birth of a Nation presented a distorted, racist view of Reconstruction as a wildly chaotic, unruly, and corrupt time. The film demonized black people and white Republicans. It glorified the Ku Klux Klan. President Woodrow Wilson, a Democrat, was one of the film's fans. In a letter to D.W. Griffith, Wilson called The Birth of a Nation a splendid production. A native of Virginia, Wilson was the first Southerner to occupy the White House since Andrew Johnson. When he ran for president, Woodrow Wilson courted the black vote, earning the support of Du Bois and other black leaders. Once in office, Wilson proved to be a false friend. A month after he was sworn in as the nation's 28th president, Wilson signed off on the resegregation of federal government agencies. From the post office to the Treasury Department, black workers contended with separate but unequal restrooms, cafeterias, workspaces. With the advent of Jim Crow and government agencies, black federal employees also faced a wave of firings and demotions. Sir, you have now been President of the United States for 6 months, and what is the result? Raged Du Bois in a September 1913 open letter to Woodrow Wilson, a letter that ran in The Crisis. It is no exaggeration to say that every enemy of the Negro race is greatly encouraged, that every man who dreams of making the Negro race a group of menials and pariahs is alert and hopeful. 7 months after The Birth of a Nation's release, the resolute Carter G. Woodson, the second black person to earn a Ph.D. from Harvard in history, 1912, laid the groundwork for an organization to research and trumpet black history and culture. The Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, today's Association for the Study of African American Life and History, ASALH. We have a wonderful history behind us, Woodson would one day proclaim in a speech at Hampton Institute. He followed his proclamation with a caution. If you are unable to demonstrate to the world that you have this record, the world will say to you, you are not worthy to enjoy the blessings of democracy or anything else. They will say to you, who are you anyway? After founding the association and operating out of a 3-story Victorian row house in Northwest D.C., Woodson went on to produce a raft of groundbreaking books, most notably the nearly 400-page textbook, The Negro in Our History, 1922, and The Miseducation of the Negro, 1933. Woodson also published the periodicals Journal of Negro History and Negro History Bulletin. In February 1926, Woodson launched Negro History Week, precursor of Black History Month. He is known as the father of Black history. Woodson's association was born in early September 1915, when the scholar was visiting Chicago. There, at a black YMCA on Wabash Avenue, he called a meeting of like-minded men to hammer out the formation of an organization that would refute the widespread myth that African Americans came from a nothing people and were a nothing people. Like thousands of other black people, Woodson and his mates were in Chicago for the Lincoln Jubilee, the August 22nd through September 16th celebration of the 50th anniversary of the abolition of slavery in the United States. The Jubilee was held at the Coliseum in the city, soon to be a mecca for a multitude of black people leaving the South in search of better jobs, better schools, better lives in the urban North as part of the Great Migration. That migration, beginning in the 1890s, picked up steam during World War I and continued well into the century. During the Jubilee's opening ceremonies, a band played My Country 'Tis of Thee. The exposition takes the Negro at 1860, when there were 4,441,730 of his color in the United States, 90% illiterate, reported the Chicago Tribune on August 22, 1915, and traces his progress in education, religion, agriculture, industry, art, literature, commerce, sociology, and miscellaneous pursuits up to the year 1915, when the Negro population is 9,828,000 and has 400 schools and 31,000 churches, with illiteracy reduced to 30.5%. Black patriots of the American Revolution, the inventions of Elijah McCoy, nailless furniture by Adelbert Lee, faculty members of the oldest private historically black university founded by African Americans, Wilberforce, in Xenia, Ohio, members of the Dumaine, Illinois Mine Rescue Corps, the business brains of Annie Turnbow Malone, a chemist with a beauty care company, Poro, headquartered in St. Louis, Missouri, a woman on her way to becoming a millionaire. This was a sampling of black pride on display at the Lincoln Jubilee. On view, too, was the work of Henry O. Tanner, best known for the paintings The Banjo Lesson and The Thankful Poor. The sculpture Awakening of Ethiopia by the lesser-known Fanny M. Stout was also there. In his booth, Carter G. Woodson sold photographs of Sojourner Truth, Frederick Douglass, and other history makers. It was the sights and sounds, the whole wondrousness of the Jubilee, that inspired Woodson to launch his association. The crowning social event, reported Chicago's Broad Axe, a black-owned weekly, came on Thursday evening, August 26th, a ball attended by more than 2,000 people, and when it wound up, more than 50 automobiles stood ready to convey many of the elegantly costumed ladies and the merry dancers to their homes. Of course, these merry revelers awoke on the morrow beneath Jim Crow clouds, for the invidious system was not limited to the South, and Jim Crow ruled and reigned by law and custom in America for many more years, deep into the 20th century. At the beginning of the century, some white scholars cast Reconstruction as a terrible time in American history, a time when ruthless, vicious white Republicans in league with vile, ignorant black Republicans tried to subjugate noble white Southerners. These historians were members of the Dunning School, named after the man who mentored them, William Archibald Dunning, a professor at Columbia University, who published his book on Reconstruction in 1907. But Reconstruction had its champions. It was also in the 20th century that other scholars pushed back against myths about Reconstruction, One was W.E.B. Du Bois with his 1935 tome Black Reconstruction, an essay toward a history of the part which black folk played in the attempt to reconstruct democracy in America, 1860 to 1880. The slave went free, stood a brief moment in the sun, then moved back again toward slavery. So wrote Du Bois of Reconstruction's destruction, which gave rise to the Jim Crow era that in turn sent the nation on a backward course from its ideals, its possibilities, its promise. But all was not lost. Just as it was in the past, so it would be in the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, and beyond, as a host of black people in America flat out refused to be defeated, to accept the status quo. So many embraced the idea in a Langston Hughes 1920s poem, I Too Sing America. With a legion of allies across the color line, they continued to strive for a just America. In keeping with the national black anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing, they told their children that the dark days would not last. They entreated their children to believe in the listening skies. They rallied them to get ready to face the rising sun, to march on till victory was won, a victory that included the triumphs of Reconstruction, most especially the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution.